kwa masita ndita Florence mbona muthiani ndienda kuthata nenda kwina withe uthata ningeni na wongoni ni kwitu kanetha wa jeshi la ukofu na wizi wa jeshi la ukofu ni makwina na ina na manyie kwina kuma tena ni na kwina na nina ndeto sianga ndiye ndeto sia bandi ni na ndeto yanga ambati sianga no kwetha na ambita bisie ni skulu na yi atwa na kotini nduta zina kesi ana inya ela wetu yenye ni nekale numisie na ine kadiwa banyi nyoka ase imaitu ni metue wethe ne kalata ni nyoka ku sindi umata na ilo kona atu tukweta nguku usi kibutu masi akwasa lakini ngai andethecia o ina akwatie vina kithanga swa ni kwithai o ite kaini ndivina ndivina ni mbeza nguku ya kwendo ya yana yanywa kibu no ni tenga umi mbeza isupo ngetha ni iwe ni muthanga u kona wata kindu chako ni wa moyo tusukuma tu no nye bae no be kibeti ina mutezi ndili miongo ene asinde thecia
Mae tulu jokungu na malunga miongo mayangi mae tulu jokungu mae tulu jokungu we na emi na malunga wezelele mayangi mae tulu jokungu we na emi na malunga miongo mayangi mae tulu jokungu we na emi na malunga ndo kula kwa noi eko wapi ambia banji ndio matungia muvea kiasi wangai ameke nesa angiasia pavumbe sisi na unye wangai ongelele vo boya ngiboya siana siaka sikale na Mungu kula si angiboya mbua iwi andu wethe kila muntu akwatoka indo niye mwamba ni salama niye mwamba ni salama niye mwamba ni salama.
Good afternoon, everybody. A really warm welcome to the audience. Today feels very special because it's the first event that I'm able to chair and see real people in real seats and in person. But can I also extend a really warm welcome to our friends and colleagues that are joining us by Zoom. Like with anything that we do for the very first time, like a hybrid event, you'd want it to run smoothly. So I say to my friends and colleagues that are on Zoom, bear with us because this is something we are doing for the first time. We hope it will work perfectly, but if it doesn't, be patient with us and just put any challenges or questions that you have in chat and we'll try to deal with them. Today's a really important event. You know, you're here to hear about Rise to the Moment. But before I talk a little bit about why here and why now, let me just say a little bit in relation to a particular quote which I think is a really powerful quote. It's a powerful quote from the Young Christians Network, Climate Network. Why now is the time for us to rise to the moment on climate change? We believe it's time to make decisions which protect people, not bank balances. No country should be pushed further into debt by climate change. It's a decade-defining opportunity to make a stand. Those are powerful words from young people that have real resonance and voice in our society. And it's such a timely debate. It's a timely debate. As I was driving in this morning, I heard the Prime Minister talk about the importance of climate and climate change. But what distinguishes the quote of young people is this notion of wanting a change now. Not tomorrow, not next year, but now. So today's debate is going to focus on the moral, the scientific, and the ethical case for urgent action. Climate change at COP26 will also be an opportunity to hear the thoughts and frustrations and desires of young people regarding the climate emergency. But before we start, let me say a few words about our distinguished panel. I'm absolutely delighted, and we're really privileged to have a panel of experts who not just talk a good story, they walk the talk in terms of their commitment, their passion and their energy, but also their critical reflection on this agenda. So without further ado, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Stephen Cottrell, Archbishop of York. You will have read the bios that you have in front of you, and I don't want to repeat those, but I do want to say two things. An agenda like this requires leadership. It requires passion and it requires commitment. And that's something that Stephen brings to the debate. And he's evidenced that by the amount of work that he's done on the numerous boards that he's sat on, and organisations that he's led that are committed to evangelism and social justice. So never has the time been more right than now. So a really warm welcome. I'm equally delighted to introduce our second panellist, Rev. Councillor Colwick, Lord Mayor of York. Again, another leader in our region and in our city who's not just driving this agenda and in terms of the church and faith communities, he's also setting up new innovations by working in partnership with other agencies to achieve shared goals. And it's that collectivism that brings that unique leadership. And again, you know, Chris has evidenced that by a number of charitable initiatives that he's founded, like the York Food Bank, the Street Angels, to name but a few. And then I'm delighted to welcome Rachel Maskell, who's joining us on Zoom. Rachel, a really warm welcome. Rachel started the Love Socialism group of the Labour MPs, who have a progressive agenda and want to kind of really bring advocacy and transformation in the Labour Party and ensure that politics is both radical and relevant. And I guess that's so important, you know, not just to us, but to the young people that are really fighting hard on this agenda. But no panel, and what makes this panel really special for me, is strong without the voice of those young people. You know, those young, rich, diverse people. So I'm really delighted to welcome Jen Morris, who is a member of the Young Christian Climate Network and who's leading the events in Glasgow for the relay to COP26. And I'll say a few more things about that at the end. A warm welcome to Peter Mori, Head of Campaigns and UK Advocacy at Christian Aid. And again, a really responsible leader who's campaigning for climate and economic justice. And I'm equally delighted to have one of our own students here because we can't host these events if we're not party to those critical debates and those critical actions. And I'm delighted to welcome Advidi Kuntran, who's the student of the University of York. She's a second-year biology student at the University of York. But again, what defines her is the work that she's already doing by actively participating in environmental transformation activities and leading, she runs a student-led organisation, soon to be registered as an NGO in India. That's not an easy thing to do, to be studying as a biology student and also taking a real stance in terms of creating change. So let me just finally say a few words about events like this. Events like this are part of a catalyst. Events like this on their own don't bring transformation. What we want to do today is to start the conversation. This is one of a series of events to highlight the climate crisis in partnership with key church leaders and influencers as part of the G7 to COP relay in collaboration with the Young Christian Climate Network. Also, Christian Aid has been working in partnership with the Young Christian Climate Network to support the relay, and in particular the residencies of cities along the route of which York is one. So without further ado, let me hand it over to our chair, who's going to take us through some of these powerful debates and discussions. And please do feel free to think about the kinds of questions that you want to put to our panel, and you can do that with the audience that we have in front of you and through chat. Thank you.
Kiran, thank you very much. I think you almost banded me in with the young members of the panel, which I was delighted about. I think it's a while now since I was described as a young person, but good company with Jen and Advaidi, so I'll take that. The climate crisis hurts us all, but people living in poverty in the global south are on the front line of this crisis every single day, and yet they've done the least to cause it, and this is an injustice. As Kiran said, this year is a crucial year in the struggle for climate justice, as the UK government hosts the COP26 climate talks in November, and we stand with people on the front line of the crisis to demand actions and not words from world leaders, and we've heard a lot of words from world leaders in recent days. I'm really, really delighted at Christian Aid that we've been involved with the Young Christian Climate Network and part of the relay that we've been taking part in from Cornwall to Glasgow, and I'm delighted that we're here in York today. And I think, as Kiran said, the relay goes with a simple but profound message, which is that we have to rise to the moment. And I think that's vital because it's going to take all of us to stop this climate crisis. So I'm really delighted to join you all here today. Today, at an important moment before the COP Climate Summit, an important moment as we sit here during Great Big Green Week with so much attention going on around the country on the battle for climate justice, and also an important moment as today is the first global awareness day on loss and damage, and we might talk about loss and damage and the losses and damages that people in the global south are facing as a result of climate change during the discussion. So it's an important moment to be here. But without further ado, I want to hand over to our first speaker, and Kiran has already introduced our speakers, so I won't do that again. So without further ado, I'd like to invite the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, to open our event today. Stephen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Kiran, Pete, sisters and brothers, it's a joy and a privilege to be with you today. If you'd switched on the radio this morning or looked at the telly and you read that a jumbo jet had just inexplicably fallen out of the sky, killing, I don't know how many people have, 750,000 people on board. If you read that, you'd be pretty shocked. If you woke up tomorrow morning and opened the newspaper, looked at the telly, saw on your phone that another one had fallen out of the sky and another 750 people had died, you'd be, wow, that is what's going on. What's tomorrow? Yeah, right. If on Saturday you woke up and it happened again, and then on Sunday, and then on Monday, and then on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, like you'd be banging the table and saying, what's going on? Something must be done. There's planes falling out of the sky. There's thousands of people dying. We've got to do something. Just today, the equivalent of 12 jumbo jets worth of people will die for the simple reason that they do not have access to fresh water. But we don't bang the table. We don't say something must be done. And actually, access to fresh water is a relatively straightforward thing for the world to solve. But it also gets us right into the hard realities of the climate emergency we are in and the need for climate justice. And in my work as Archbishop of York, but also as a bishop of the worldwide Anglican Communion, I have had the privilege of visiting some of the places where the climate emergency is hitting first and worst. 5 or 6 years ago, I was with bishops in Polynesia, where rising sea levels mean their whole homes and habitats are literally sinking beneath the waves. And just 3 years ago, I was in Marsabit in northern Kenya, where it hadn't rained near the Somalian border, people leading a kind of semi-nomadic life, and it hadn't rained for 18 months. And the people that I was with, I mean, first of all, they showed me hospitality, which is another subject for another day, but I need to tell you, to receive hospitality from the poorest of the poor is one of the most moving things that can ever happen. They showed me the skeletons of their animal. In a drought, animals tend to die first. As animals die first, then people. They showed me the reservoir where it was reckoned there was probably 2 months' water left. Then there was nothing. The two saddest things I saw were first when I went into a village, we were in a Land Rover. We had lots of water in the back. There were children waving empty water bottles at us, and I couldn't think what it was at first. They were pleased to see us, and then I realised, of course, they were begging for water. They knew that we would have water on board. And then even sadder, I saw some children drinking dirty, wretched, foul water from a ditch. Because when you're very thirsty, you will drink anything. So we must do something. The time is now. And there are things we can do. And I want to speak very, very briefly for another minute or so about where I think the church might be able to help. So in the church, we have a prayer that we say every day. Some of you might be familiar with it. It goes, "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done." And what we used to say, if you look at the old prayer book from sort of 500 years ago, it used to say, "In earth as it is in heaven." But somewhere along the line in the last 100 years or so, "in earth as it is in heaven" has somehow changed to "on earth as it is in heaven." If you know the prayer, it's most likely that you will say, "on earth as in heaven." It was not like an organised change by some commission. It just kind of happened. That "in earth" became "on earth." And therein, as far as I can see, lies the whole challenge of the environmental crisis. That we used to believe and to know that we lived in the earth. That we were part of it, interdependent with it. And if we had a relationship with the earth, it was to be the good stewards of the earth, living in it and with it and serving it. And then somewhere in the last couple of 100 years, we moved to a position from living in the earth to living on the earth. And now I'm separate from the earth. The earth is mine, and I can do with it what I will. And from that, Disaster upon disaster has flowed. We've been blind to the consequences of our actions, and we now live in a time where, unless we take action, the very earth itself is in mortal danger. One last thing. If you know the prayer, it goes on, give us today our daily bread. And I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of years thinking about that line, give us today our daily bread. And it's kind of, I'm a slow learner obviously, it's kind of dawned on me what it means. So I thought I'd tell you what it means. I think it means this. It means, give me today enough for today. Stop me, save me, prevent me from wanting more than my share. And yeah, I hope that changes in legislation and technological improvements will make this situation better, but I don't put my trust in them. We do need those things, but we need so much more. What we need is a change of heart. A change of heart where we recognise that we live in the earth, and a change of heart where we start to learn to know what enough looks like. So no, I don't want strawberries on Christmas Day flown in from the other side of the world. I don't want that. I need to live differently. I need to inhabit the planet differently, sustainably. And I look forward to working with people of other faiths, with all people of goodwill, to build a coalition around learning again to live in the earth and learning what enough looks like, which is massive change for our consumer society, which so likes economic graphs going like this. Those days must end and we must change. And hey, the church has got loads of things wrong on this. But I'm determined to try to work with others to make it better. And I esteem those of you who are walking to Glasgow, and I'm grateful for the voice of young people, their prophetic voice, and I look forward to your hard questions.
Thank you. Stephen, thank you so much. I think that's a really, really good way to kick off this discussion, and perhaps none of us will quite look at the Lord's Prayer in the same way again after hearing from you on that. I'm going to turn to each of our other panel members now to give some brief introductory remarks, and then we're going to turn to some questions, some of which have been pre-submitted and some of which will take live during this event. I have one question for each of our panel members as they give their introductory remarks, which is this: why is now the time for us to rise to the moment on climate change? And Rachel Maskell, thank you so much for joining us, I assume from Westminster today. And let me come to you first to give us your brief opening remarks.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you. Our planet is burning, our ice caps are melting, our species are vanishing, and our air is polluted. Our people are starving and thirsting. That is why. Flood and famine, war and drought are existential threats which are challenging us all. Even if we look on Afghanistan at this terrible time, it is drought and famine which could be far greater than the horrific humanitarian scenes we are witnessing. The Syrian crisis was sparked by a famine due to the changing climate and drought. The time has passed for discussion forums and focus groups. The time now is to act. Here in York, we are seeing river levels rising, ever more frequent adverse weather events, ever more floods, ever higher and higher levels on our rivers. Air pollution is high. It takes over 100 lives prematurely each year in York, around 50,000 lives across our nation. Just in 39 days' time, the world will descend on Glasgow, but the whispers of action are faint. The curve of doom is growing ever stronger and steeper as the crisis is growing ever greater. All while Parliament is trying to curb rights of those who dare speak out, protest and make their voice heard. So what must we do? Just this week, we have heard about a gas crisis, but the crisis of using gas, coal, and dirty fuels is not that just of supply. It is the fact that we have depended on that supply and not diversified. Today, we hear that this winter fuel poverty will rise by 500,000 people, as simultaneously universal credit and working tax credits are taken, as taxes and national insurance will rise. Climate and economic justice are linked, they're joined and must never be separated. But as we look on our planet, we must know that the beginning of the future begins now. We can never change the past, but the future is ours. The future is ours not just to regret, but to set right, to speak up and to act. As we all stand on our fragile planet right now, as Christians, we believe that we are placed on this planet for purpose and to act. And as we act, there is something we can all do through our lifestyles, through our advocacy, through our action, through speaking up and for making sure things happen. And I carry a very heavy responsibility put to me by my constituents to turn this climate crisis into one which mitigates against those risks. We all have power. It's about how we use that power to bring about change. And therefore we need to go further and faster to ensure that our dreams for the future are turned into reality. We will not get climate justice until we get trade justice and economic justice, a radical new deal, creating jobs and retrofitting our homes and businesses, to research to transform our approach to mitigate against the advance of climate challenges, to drive things forward about doing things differently, living differently, moving differently, traveling differently, producing differently. So it's not okay just to think about tomorrow. We have got to think about the future generations too. So let's rise together and let's bring that challenge to the fore and let's bring about that change.
So much. Some really important things that you reminded us of there. And I think talking about the impact that the climate crisis has on people in poverty in the UK, as well as our brothers and sisters globally, is really important. And making that connection, I think, is really important. But also reminding us of your responsibility as an elected politician as well. And really important that we remember as Christians to pray for our politicians and the roles that you play in Parliament and in local government as well. So thank you so much for those words. I wanted to turn next to Advaidi, a student here at York. Fantastic to have you with us. Thank you so much for being here today. Advaidi, why do you think now is the time for us to rise to the moment on climate change?
A happy afternoon to one and all present here. This is probably not the first time we all are hearing or addressing a climate emergency, but it is definitely not going to be the last, as it has become the need of the hour for us to save life on Earth. Let us all imagine a part of the world breathing the best quality air, drinking the cleanest of water, and being fortunate enough to access a quality diet. Life is really good. Why would one even need to think about saving the planet? But little do we know the story on the other side. Young and old fighting for access to clean water, hundreds of deaths due to poverty, starvation and hunger every single hour, children losing their childhood to fight for basic needs than to be laughing and running with the wind on green fields. A beautiful world being a reality on one side stays forever a dream on the other. So we have decided to fight till every being on earth is promised a better tomorrow. And what we are going to do for it is why we all have gathered here today. We as individuals need to take a series of imperfect steps, the main being to consume less. An average person wears an article of clothing only 7 times before they discard it. The cute dress you bought on sale last week was probably the 27th one you promised yourself would be the last. Before you stand in the queue to pay, ask yourself this question: will I still need it even when the world is coming to an end? Or try asking it, or try asking if you would like a burrito instead. Works for me all the time. Now, what can greater organizations like the church or the university could do for the fight? Switching to more renewable sources of energy to run appliances will be a great step and would make a huge difference. It's easier for me to say than for them to do. But if we give it a little thought, we will be able to find the best solution using other renewable sources. The solution varies from place to place depending on various factors. Extensive research and planning is very much required, which can be sought from our very own scientific community. There are also solutions that are nature-based. They involve working with nature to solve the challenges of today. Installing birdhouses and feeds for the birds of York is one of my favorites. Our winged friends help us control pests and plant more trees with their droppings. However, bird-like crows become a threat when they reach higher numbers as their scavengers. Be sure of who you encourage. Another nature-based solution is plantation activities to increase the green cover. This has various benefits, including locking up carbon, aiding pollination, and holding soil to avoid flooding around water bodies. Now, what the government can do is to motivate the public, like in the installation of rainwater harvesting units in every household. Gallons of water can be saved with the amount of rainfall York receives throughout the year. We can store it for the summer or drought we might face in the future. There are many success stories that we can learn from. There are countless ways for us to fight for a better tomorrow, and I can go on, but there are just not enough people who choose to do it. All we need to understand and realize is that our choice matters and every one of our action counts. It makes a noise, maybe not today, maybe not here, but it definitely will someday, somewhere. It even makes a louder noise when we all come together. The government and various other business organizations hold a huge responsibility to bring everybody together. They can easily lead people better than when people do it themselves. I'm from India, and it is sad to say that I've never seen stars in the night sky like I do here. I've read news on how many children died due to fumes from garbage dumps. Multinational companies in far developed countries have overexploited and dumped tons of garbage, leaving many to fight for basic amenities. A supportive example that I can give here are mica mines. Mica mines are common in India, where 8 to 15-year-old children are forced into labor. Due to very minimal funds, there are no missionaries, sadly due to which many children died and are dying while mining as the earth above perishes them. It is high time the issue needs to be addressed worldwide and is to be taken very seriously. And remember, what you do today determines what a child on the other side of the world could do tomorrow. Sooner or later, we'll have to meet the same fate. As the saying goes, the boat sinks irrespective of which side the hole is. So it is important for us to pledge to take small steps, one at a time, imperfectly for the fight. The alarm has already been ringing, the fight has begun. Not too long for us to know who shall win. Finally, I would like to thank everybody for this wonderful opportunity and for having come here to make the choice. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Advaidi, thank you so much. That was really inspiring. And I think really important to remind us of our own personal decisions and the decisions that we make and how every action that we take counts, as well as the important points you made about what the church can do and what the university can do and the way that all of these things are connected. And I'll think about that point about the choice between buying a new dress or a burrito. I'll definitely go through my mind next time I'm out shopping. That was a great fact about how few times we wear so many items of clothes that we buy. So thank you for that. Really, really useful and inspiring words. I'm next going to turn to the Lord Mayor. Thank you for joining us today. Lord Mayor, why do you think now is the time for us to rise to the moment on climate change?
Thank you very much. I think we've all heard enough this afternoon and have heard enough over the last weeks, months, years. We know that we're in the last chance saloon. And I don't have a prepared speech, but I have been really moved by what I've heard from Advaidi, from Rachel, and from Archbishop Stephen. I sit here as someone who's privileged to serve the city as, in this particular year, the Lord Mayor of York. But you might have heard, I'm also the Reverend Councillor Chris Colwick. I've been in York since 1984. I came to York working in the church, and for many years I was based in the chaplaincy at York St John University. But I've worked with many partners across the city. And as was said earlier, what seems so obvious to me is that we have to work together. And whilst that's been true of some of the things that were mentioned earlier, it is even more the case when we begin to ask questions about how we tackle climate change here in York. And so I sit here keen to hear your questions, keen to contribute what I can. I do not sit here as any kind of expert. I'm not leading in the sense of having an executive responsibility within the City of York Council. I don't sit here to be political. I get a year off from that as Lord Mayor. But I do sit here to represent the city, and I was delighted when I heard that the Young Christian Climate Network were planning this relay from Cornwall to Glasgow, and I was foolish enough to email and say, if I can help in any way, please let me know. What I meant by that was maybe a photograph on the steps of the Mansion House. But when the reply came back, well, you could join the panel on Thursday afternoon. Of course, I'm happy to be part of this. And thank you so much for those who've contributed so far.
Thank you for being here. Let's make sure that we get to questions really soon so that you can hear from all these fantastic people who are both joining here and online. And thank you for your contributions today. Let me turn finally then to Jen Morris, leading light in the Young Christian Climate Network with lots of plans for what's going to happen when we get to Glasgow. What inspired you to get involved? Why do you think this is the moment for us to take action on climate change?
Well, I won't talk too much more about how bad things are. I think Advaidi's touched on that really much more powerfully than I can from personal experience. But I think there's a fallacy behind that question of why is now the time to act. It implies that doing nothing is doing nothing. Doing nothing does not do no harm. Business as usual is not us pootling along the flat. Business as usual is us accelerating towards a cliff edge that we don't know what comes next. And each day that we carry on business as usual is thousands and thousands of tons of CO2 emissions. Every incremental degree of heat matters, and also each day that we don't act. All of these countries that are on the front line that we've heard so much about are sinking further and further into debt. And that is debt that for the most part they owe to rich nations who don't need the money, to creditors, to big banks. In 2020, developing nations spent $370 billion just on interest payments and servicing that debt. That money could not go to their health services, to deal with COVID, could not go to mitigation, to renewable energy, to adaptation, to loss and damage, to protection. None of these things. And this is not, for our part, an economical choice, it's a political choice. Because in 2019, the UK alone, we spent $17 billion supporting fossil fuel companies, mainly in tax cuts and through the UK Export Fund. For a bit of context, in the 5 years from 2015 to 2020, we spent about $7 billion on climate finance. This is not an economic question, it's a political choice that we're making, not to help these countries that are going into debt from the mess that we've made, not to put the finance that we have towards renewable energy, heating, transport, the places where it's really important, but to actually continue to prop up the cause of the problem, not the solution. And the way we talk about this has to change as well. It's very convenient to put the pressure on the individual to do your recycling, to distract from these systemic issues of financing and how we structure our economy and these problems of debt that we're foisting on other countries. So, yes, the time is to act now, but that doesn't mean that not acting is also a harmless option. In the climate crisis, time is not money, time is lives, and we just can't afford to waste anymore.
Jen, thank you. It's a great way to finish those opening remarks and a really stark reminder for what we're talking about today. So we've heard from all of our panellists. on why they think this is such a critical conversation for us to be having today. We, in the days leading up to this event, we asked for some pre-submitted questions, and I have a number of those. I also want to make sure that we've got time to hear from people in the room and online as well. But I'm going to start with one of the questions that we had submitted before, which is from someone called Christine Bromwich, who I think might be joining us online as well. And Christine asks, insulating houses needs to be higher up the agenda, but how can we get the government to address this other than lying down on motorways, which seems like a very timely question given the protests happening on the M25 at the moment. Rachel, can I come to you first on that point? How can we tackle something like home insulation and get that on the agenda without perhaps taking the kind of actions that have been taken on the M25 in recent days?
Well, clearly when politicians don't act, other people have to, and they have to sometimes go to extreme measures to be heard. And whilst we obviously don't want to see that because we want the action, I certainly don't condemn people for trying to forward an agenda. Obviously, we've had the Green Homes deal, which didn't deliver, only 70,000 homes having the retrofit being put in place. The scale of ambition is too small for the scale of the challenge that we're dealing with. And therefore, it's absolutely crucial that we put together that agenda, which is going to bring about that transformation, but not to see that this is an inconvenience for government, but to see this as an advantage, creating those jobs in communities up and down our country, good quality skilled jobs, which will transform the lives of individuals, holding those jobs, upskill them, give them those opportunities in life. That's what a Green New Deal does. And that's why we need to join up this economic and environmental agenda to ensure that we see those jobs rise, because as those jobs rise, people will be paying into the system, and obviously people will be paying fewer fuel bills, and as a result of that, less people will be living in poverty and depending on the state for support. So the benefits always outweigh the costs economically and environmentally, and that's why we've got to join up those dots. Sometimes I see government departments working in its silos, but we've got to stretch them across to make sure they deliver, because communities will benefit, and of course our country will benefit too. So the climate economics are there to justify such programs. It's just about priorities, and if the climate is not the priority through every single policy decision, then a government is not doing its job in this day.
Rachel, thank you. Does anyone else want to come in on that question? Yeah,
Can I just make a comment? I wonder if any of you would guess what proportion of carbon emission in this city comes from homes. I wonder what you might guess that would be. 10%, 20%, 30%? The answer's 40%. 40%. And from buildings, 60%. So if we are not asking this question, or the most basic question in terms of insulating our homes, we're not even beginning to answer the challenge. And it is, thinking of all of the technological solutions, must be one of the simplest, to hug our homes. And whilst, of course, we can complain about the government doing this and not doing that, but all of us have a part to play. We can do something about the properties that we have some responsibility for. And so I would just add that to our consideration.
Thank you.
That I'm keen that we don't just ask what other people can do, but quite rightly ask, what can I do?
I love that idea of hugging our homes. I have a couple of pre-submitted questions from, I think, people who might be in the room. Is Christopher Copeland here? No. Okay. Or Beryl Little? Beryl. Wonderful. Beryl, I was wondering if you, sort of almost relates to this point, but from a church perspective, I was wondering if you could ask your question, and then I'll repeat it afterwards for the people online. So the question for people online who might not have heard that is that we have thousands and thousands of church buildings right across our nation, most of which have self-facing roofs. Isn't it time that we had solar panels on all of those roofs? Stephen, could I turn to you first?
Yes,
Should the church be doing more on that?
It's a nice easy one, because the short answer is yes. And the encouraging answer is it's precisely those things. So the Church of England a few years ago made a commitment to be net carbon zero by 2030, 9 years' time, which is a very, very ambitious and bold commitment ahead of all the other commitments that other governments and nations are making, because we felt that if we were to have any credibility in trying to speak prophetically into this debate, we had to be seen to be acting. And so there are huge discussions and plans being, I mean, as you know, there are solar panels going onto churches at the moment. Not all of them, but some of them. York Minster itself is looking into it at the moment. Certainly where I live, at Bishopthorpe Palace, just down the road, we are looking into putting solar panels on the roof. So there's a huge amount happening. It is going to be difficult because most of our buildings are, or a very, very large proportion are Grade 1 listed buildings. And so right now we're in discussion with heritage bodies because it's not quite as simple as, it's not our building in quite the same way as a house might be your house. But we're determined to find ways of doing that, and indeed a whole other host of other things, such as insulation. And also actually in many of our village churches, which actually do already have a very, very low carbon footprint, very low, it is as simple as changing to LED lights, that can make a massive difference. Now, obviously that isn't true for York Minster, but it is true for some of our rural parishes. Ground source heating is the other thing that we're looking to put into all our vicarages. It is a huge, huge, ambitious and pretty terrifying programme, but and I don't know whether we'll get there by 2030. But if we get a long way towards it, it will, I think, be a significant achievement. And the thing I met with some of the young people at lunchtime. The thing as well, which I would commend to other organisations and indeed to the government, is when you make a bold commitment like that, it doesn't have to galvanise you, because you can no longer keep it in the too difficult pile, and you can no longer say, well, actually, you wouldn't say it, but you're thinking it, my successor can worry about this. It's right on your desk right now. And that for us, when we made the decision a few years ago, that the biggest difference is that it's made all of us sit up and now begin to take action. Yeah, let's see. There are other people in the audience here today. Just see a few hands to see, just so I get a sense of people who want to ask questions. There's a gentleman there, a couple of, oh gosh, there are lots of people. That's great. Can I come to, yeah, lady with the dog collar there. Sorry, just because I saw your hand first earlier. Thank you. Hi, Catherine. The kind of the essence of the question was that cooperation is going to be key for us to tackle the climate crisis, and that there's, what's going to make people cooperate to be able to really do that and to tackle those kind of issues. Let me come to Advedi and Jen perhaps first on this one. Is that okay? Advedi, do you want to come? And yeah, I'll come to the Lord now.
Asking people to cooperate in a larger scale is far from reality, because there are different views and opinions that people follow and have. So what we could do to bring a larger community to consume less or to follow other sustainable measures is by bringing laws into enforcement, where the government could strictly bring a law into enforcement saying you have to do this. So maybe instead of having none doing it, we could at least bring 5% of the population to do it, just by government and business organizations. And in your question, you also said that even if we say we don't want to do it, It's the big organizations and multinational companies that produce a lot. So it's all about boycotting their goods. Just ignoring them and not buying them at all is going to bring their markets down, and eventually it's going to make them realize that people do not need it more. So it's all on the people, that we need to make a choice and we need to let the government know that we are serious. So even if there's a law that you're going to bring, we will follow it. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Jen.
I would echo that, and I would say if we needed every single person in the world to make the right decision every single day, we'd be in even more trouble than we already are, quite frankly. So it's actually quite a good thing that we need a sort of systemic change and not every single person, because we already know we're not going to make the right choice every single day. But it's really simple things that they throw up, I don't know around it, but they're throwing up new build houses like anything. And if you made the building regs that every single one of them had to be insulated, every single one had to have a heat pump, these are huge, huge things, because we talk about solar panels and wind power and all of this. Energy is 20% of UK emissions, you know. Far more is, well, a quarter is transport, a quarter is homes and heating and all of these things, but it's not fashionable, it doesn't get talked about as much. But if you know, we need to get on with it. We need to, all these homes that are being thrown up, just stick a heat pump in every single one of them. Consumers won't even notice, you know. You need to make it easy for people to make the right choices, and, you know, take that. And that doesn't make their lives any worse. It means they don't have to choose between doing, you know, missing out on anything. It's just there and it's easy, but we just need to get on with it and make these things happen and target it, because 50% of the world's emissions come from the 10% richest in the world. So if those 10% came down to the average, we'd be halfway there. It's about targeting it. It's not making everybody give up their once-a-year trip to Spain. It's making the people who are flying from Edinburgh to London 4 times a week. It's targeting those changes, and I think that's how we have the biggest impact, rather than trying to make everybody just suffer for the sake of it type thing.
Thanks, Jen. Lord Mayor, you wanted to respond on this one as well.
Just briefly to add a specific York context, because you're absolutely right about the need to cooperate. And I'm pleased that here in York, a climate commission has been established, which is not a political thing. It stands outside of that, but has brought together some of the key partners in the city. I think I'm right in saying that includes the University of York, it includes Nestle, it includes the NHS, it includes, I think, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, some of the key players in the city who are not there for yet you know, more strategies and meetings, but for action and for working together to reduce the climate emissions in the city. And that kind of working together is what we need. And again, I think, you know, we need to bring things down, yes, to a global level, a national level, but also to a very local level, because if it's not happening locally, it's not happening.
I think, as Jen said, the collaboration is obviously between different groups and different peoples, but also actually saying there's different ways that we can make progress, you know. And so, like, you know, solar panels will be appropriate on some buildings, they won't be on others, or it won't be possible on others. But there's actually other things you can do which will be much more effective, like a ground source heating pump might actually be a much better investment. So we do need to work together and recognise there will be different strategies that we can employ.
Karen.
Let me come on to a couple of themes that, you know, the audience have kind of raised in the panel, and the questions, you know, on Zoom have been similar. I want to change tack a little bit, because I think it's a really powerful question that's been posed, and it was our starting position that, you know, we have a responsibility, I have a responsibility. And a statement and a question in the chat function on Zoom is, what if I can't do that? You know, what if I can't buy sustainably because I just don't have the money? What if I can't do what we're asking in terms of insulating my, you know, house? So it'd be good to get people's reflections on that. And then the paradox to that is that, you know, there's a whole series of questions on Zoom about, you know, inevitably we'd expect this, wouldn't we? Rachel, I guess they're kind of aimed at you in terms of representing government, you know, asking questions like, well, why, you know, should government be legislating in terms of, you know, the way that building work, for example, in schools and in hospitals is done, so that we can get to carbon neutrality? So one is about the I, what can I do, you know, given my personal circumstances? And then the other is about that notion of collaboration, the I, the we, and the state.
Rachel, can we come to you on that question then? Because I think that also connects to some of the points that you were making about the links here to issues of economic justice as well.
Thank you. I mean, I certainly believe we've got some incredible opportunities. We heard all of that language over the last 18 months about this is a time for transition, to reset, I think was the word that was used, economic peace, as well as kind of obviously that our kind of direction as a country. And we haven't yet seen that reset plan. So I think it's worth reminding your politicians about that reset agenda, which is really important. What did people talk about? What were the values people have talked about over the last 18 months? It wasn't about getting more and more out of our exhausted planet. It was about putting back into our planet. It was about bringing our communities together to advance the opportunities for one another. And we saw that demonstrated so powerfully through the pandemic. But we have got, in the same way we've been through a health crisis together, we've got now our environmental crisis together. So we need to join up that in locality, as well as obviously on a government agenda to see that strategy come through, which is about transformation, because where we've come from wasn't great, but where we could go together is immeasurable. So I think we've really got to help politicians to realise the opportunities which sit before them.
Thank you, Rachel. Jen, can I come back to you on the other question that Kiran asked there about, you know, our personal response? What if we can't, say, afford to make the choices that you and Advadia are talking about?
Well, and this is a thing where we have to make sure that our solution to the climate crisis doesn't just make that injustice even worse, doesn't make that inequality even greater, because a lot of these changes are expensive. But this is where, you know, government grants can come in. So in Scotland, certainly there are still lots of grants still available for heat pump installation, for, you know, upgrading homes. But that's why we need things like the building regulations, as I say. It would be so easy whilst you're building the house, that's the time to stick an air source heat pump in it. People won't even notice, insulate well. And at a local level, a really important thing is transport. And again, that's something that local government and national government can provide and can, you know, subsidised for those communities that need it most and can't afford it. And it is also, these changes that we're talking about, they benefit people, you know. If we can get cars off the streets, 40,000 people in the UK die each year from air pollution. In the UK, it's 4.2 million globally. And these are the changes that will be really, really helped by, you know, we'll kill two birds with one stone by doing this. But these provisions have got to be put in place by those with the resources, by local government, with active transport schemes, with buses, with, you know, public transport. Transport is actually the UK's biggest source of emissions. But again, it's not as sexy as putting up a big wind turbine, so it sort of gets pushed down the list. But that's something that is provided by local government and by you know, nationally as well. And it should be done, it should be made the easier choice, you know. It shouldn't be cheaper to fly from London to Glasgow than to get the train. But it's prohibitively expensive to get the train from London to Glasgow, which is mad. And those are things that as a country we can choose to change, but we just have to have the will to do so. It's just a choice of where we spend the money.
Thank you, Jen. Let me take three questions together quickly. There's a gentleman here in the blue, a gentleman in the Extinction Rebellion face mask, and the gentleman just behind him. So there's essentially a question around, should institutions divest? If we care about, you know, divest in fossil fuels if we care about the climate, or should we hang on to them? Great. So there's a follow-up question to that. What specifically are organisations on the panel doing to make sure that we're divesting, we're taking the actions that we need to take so that we're not contributing to this climate crisis? And then, gentleman there. So there was a question about the amount of money that governments around the world spend on the arms trade, and a challenge that can we really meaningfully tackle the climate crisis unless we're also going to address that issue.
And I might add that the UK is in the top 5 spenders
on planet Earth. And the UK is, and sorry, I'm just repeating this for people at home, and the UK is in the top 5 spenders on that. Okay, so Stephen, some very specific questions for you, which I'm sure you knew were coming today about divestment. So how do you answer those questions around?
I'd like to say something about the arms one as well, but let's start with divestment. I mean, the simple answer is yes, we must divest. I can't speak for other institutions, but I can speak for the Church of England. However, I don't think it's necessarily a simple choice between divesting and not divesting. The view the Church of England has taken is to set a sharp target for this, and we made this decision in 2018 that we would give the companies that we do hold shares in 5 years to come in line with the Paris protocols, and if they haven't, we will divest, and they need to be seen to be making significant progress. So, you know, we would say we're in the conversion business. So we could divest now and lose all influence. We've decided not to divest immediately, but to retain influence, to use shareholder power and to get those companies to transition. With 12 companies, we've had significant success. With 9 companies, they have done nothing and we have divested, and we will divest from all of them unless there's significant progress in 2023. I'm not suggesting everyone would agree with that position the Church of England has taken, but I think it's a pretty good position, and it's demonstrably making some companies change much quicker to diversify into green energy. So that's the position of the Church of England. On the arm...
Stephen, sorry, before we come on to the arms trade, and I will let you answer that question because it's a really important one. I can see Jen quietly shaking her head sat next to you, and I just want to get, if that's all right, I just want to give Jen an opportunity just to respond on that, because I can see you don't agree.
I just think there's a certain, forgive me, naivety, I suppose, in expecting that we have any, that Shell is listening to the church on this, you know? I mean, the Church of England has shares in Shell, who are one of the main developers of Cambo, which, because the government have said they're not going to give a decision until after COP, means they're going to say yes. If they were going to say no, they'd say that before COP. Back of the envelope calculation, 280 million barrels of oil, 23 kilograms CO2 per barrel, 4,000 tons is 4 deaths. That's 6,000 deaths, you know, sort of back of the envelope. No. And so I can see the position, but I can't see, there's fundamentally no way that a fossil fuel company is going to be
some of them
net zero.
Some of them have been making significant transitions to green energy, so there has been some significant success. Others there isn't, and we have made it very clear that in 2023 we will divest. And in the meantime, we hold the view that we can use our influence to try to make changes. Now, I'm not saying everyone will agree with that, but I just don't think it's fair to say the Church of England is doing nothing about this. We are trying to use our influence to make change with a very clear... And of course, if we did walk away today, that would have some very short-term impact on Shell, but it wouldn't actually make them change. While we're in the room, round the table, there is a chance that we can make them change.
We're running out of time.
But it's okay, you know, I understand that people disagree.
I'm glad that we've had that exchange. I want to have the opportunity to bring in Rachel again as well. Rachel, can I come to you perhaps first on the question on the arms trade, and then perhaps if I come to the Lord Mayor to answer the question around you know, what the City Council is doing with regard to that, just so that, you know, everyone gets their question answered and we manage to get through all of them. Rachel, can I come to you on that question? You know, can we really
absolutely
tackling the arms trade?
Absolutely happy to address that. I mean, the reality is that economic priorities have got to change. Climate change is demanding that. And when it comes to the arms trade, we are trading with countries at this time, which we know are then using these to perpetrate other people's human rights. And unless we've got an ethical strand to our trade policies, which look at human rights then I have to say, what kind of economy have we got? So absolutely, as we transition, which must be immediate, we need to transition those jobs, because often we hear from the trade unions and others, this is about jobs. We need to transition those jobs into a sustainable agenda to make good quality jobs work in the wider economy. So I would say we need immediate action on the arms trade to diversify from there, but also to listen to the courts on the arms trade. For instance, the deals which are being done at the time with Saudi Arabia have been deemed not to sit within a legal framework. Government have been warned. However, they continue to sell arms, which are then being used against the Yemenis people, where there is a massive humanitarian crisis. So we can't divorce our responsibility to say, well, that's about our economic generation and wealth in our country at the expense of the devastation that it is causing elsewhere in the globe. Personally, I think we need to completely pull out of the arms trade, because the biggest crisis we've got is our climate, and we need to put all energy into addressing that.
Thank you, Rachel. Stephen, you wanted to also say something on the arms trade
Yeah, we may
question.
want to go into other things, but I mean, I just wanted to give my agreement to the questioner. I mean, from a Christian point of view, it is, you know, as somebody who's been very active in the peace movement, you know, for most of my adult life, it is so important that we carry on bearing witness against these weapons. And I agree with Rachel that actually it's going to be hard, but we need to develop a new green economy, and actually these companies need to turn their swords into ploughshares.
Lord Mayor, on the question about our own institutions and what we should be doing, is it just warm words from councils, from churches and others, or, you know, what other practical action should we be seeing so that we're actually doing what we're demanding of others?
Absolutely. Well, the question was asked specifically earlier about the City of York. City of York doesn't have its own pension fund. It's part of a much larger one, but we do have a representative from the City of York Council on that fund. And if anyone knows my colleague Councillor Christian Vassy, he is passionate about this and has the full support of the council. We've voted more than once to give him our total support in any way that he can to divest within that pension fund, and it is certainly happening, so I can reassure you on that. But I think that there's a really strong argument, and whilst I understand the argument for staying in the room and having a voice at the table, I think we really have to say, what is a pension fund there for? It is to secure income for the pensions of the future, and investing in the old economies is not going to provide that. It's investing in the new economies, the emerging economies, that's going to provide that. So I would also say to you, you've heard me more than once, what can you do? Do you know where your pension is invested? And are you asking questions of your pension providers?
Advaidi, I want to come to you with our final question before we close this afternoon's session. We had a number of questions that were sent in from the Green leaders at Archbishop Holgate School, which is a school here in York, and a group of Green leaders there who are a group of students who work to make a positive change in their school, submitted some questions, and some of them, I think, hopefully have joined the event virtually today. And Rachel, I was wondering actually whether we might send you the list of questions, because we won't get to them all today, but as their local MP and perhaps Lord Mayor as well, we could share those with you to see what students in your city are asking about. I wanted to take, Advaidi, a question from Sophie, who said, what more can be done to influence people in York to care about climate change? And I was just thinking, with your time here at York, spending lots of time with students here at York, what do you think, what more can be done so that we're not just a room of however many we are here today and the people joining us at home, but that there are many more of us joining this important discussion?
I feel that organizing a lot of awareness programs, because people aren't aware of the fact that sustainability can be both easy and it can also be the most difficult choice to make. And so organizing a lot of awareness programs and fundraisers for supporting small-scale business, you know, instead of supporting large-scale business, like over the weekends where anybody could join, like a neighborhood could come together, you know, to organize a fundraiser and could support one of their family members to encourage a sustainable product that they are making it themselves. And cleanup programs over the weekends organized by, led by students or led by any member of the public, or you know, any other specific organization could also be done. A lot of cleanup activities, plantation activities, and yeah, but it's all about the awareness that people need to be taught that sustainability can be as easy as saying no to buying new stuff although you have it at your home, or it could be as difficult as installing solar panels in every church in England, because due to the limited sun activity in England, it's not really possible for us to run all the lights from the solar panel that could be, you know, in just one side of the building. But looking into other options, you know, hydroelectric power, that is, you know, getting power from water currents or wind turbines could also be an option. But again, we need to plan using our in-house expertise, that is our scientific community from our very own university, could be a solution. But it's as easy, and it's also, you know, pretty difficult because we making a small change from our household, yes, it can make an impact, but it's not as loud as a company shutting down, a big multinational company shutting down. So it's either or.
Thank you. Thank you. I know there have been so many more questions that we could have taken today, so I'm sorry to all of those who haven't had an opportunity to ask your question, and also thank you to all of you online who've posted questions as well. I'm sure we could have continued this going for another hour or 2 hours probably this afternoon, but unfortunately we have to draw our time to a close. I wanted to really thank all of our panellists for taking part today. Advedi Kuntran, Jen Morris from YCCN, Reverend Councillor Chris Cullwick, the Lord Mayor of York, Rachel Muskell for joining us online as well, and Archbishop Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you all of you for coming and joining us today, and for those of you who've joined us online as well. We started this event today by watching a film of a project that Christian Aid supports in Kenya. And I just want to return to that film and to think about some of the points that people have made in relation to the people who are on the front line of the crisis right now, and just to remind ourselves of that point as we think about these 39 days in the run-up to the COP26 summit in Glasgow. As we journey on this walk that's taken us from Cornwall to Glasgow, we go on this walk together in solidarity with our sisters and brothers who are on the front line of the crisis. And as I said at the beginning, we go with demands of actions, not words. And that means actions at the COP to limit global temperatures to 1.5 degrees, to ensure that we end our support for fossil fuels and invest in clean energy, and fundamentally important that we invest in the financial support that is needed for communities on the front line of the crisis, whether that's cancelling debts, as Jen said, whether that's restoring the aid budget that needs to take place, and really, really importantly, not only meeting the 100 billion that was promised in Paris per year to support countries, both with mitigation and adaptation to the climate crisis, but going beyond that. That should just be the starting point, and investing funds that are so needed in loss and damage, where communities have lost already a huge amount to the extreme weather that's been caused by the climate crisis. So we have huge demands as we go into the COP, very high expectations, But also I think we need to come out of the COP, the other side, willing to keep going on this journey and continuing on with the demands that we have, because this decade is going to be critical if we really are going to stop this climate crisis. It will take all of us. So I'm so grateful for all of you being here today and for you being part of it. Please do get involved with the YCCN Relay. There's plenty of time right up to COP to do that. You can do that in partnership with Christian Aid as well. Very simple thing you can do to demonstrate your support is to make one of our prayer boats. They're outside today, and you can do that online as well. And we're going to be gathering those up and taking those to COP with the YCCN and others, and using that as a demonstration of the way that churches and Christians are using their voice to speak out and demanding action for climate justice this year. So thank you so much to all of you who've joined us today. Thank you to everyone online. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and I look forward to seeing you again, hopefully, for another important discussion on what we can do together on climate justice. Thank you.